What? Oh. Oh, hey. Hey, welcome to part 3 of this Harbor Freight Dust Collector Frankenstein build. My name is Scott, and I am the Simple Tecton. During this video, I'm going to actually cover the plenum box and how I put it together and connected it between the Harbor Freight motor and the Wynn Environmental filter. I hit a few snags, but I'll show you how I got past them. So hang with me and let's take on this challenge. With the upper frame and the lower frame completed, I kind of wanted to get a visual, so I threw everything together on the top of my bench to kind of see where that plenum box would go and take a few rough measurements. While I was looking at it, I realized there was something a little off. What I realized is with the motor sitting in the upper frame, I realized it wasn't sitting quite plumb as it would sit on the wall. So I got my level out and realized it was a little bit bigger than I thought. So I guess it's time to do some engineering. A picture's worth 1,000 words. Notice the level at the top. That's what I need. And I need this level to match the same. So in order to do that, I gotta find the angle that will make my smaller level match my larger level. And this is how I found it. I used this angle finder and I adjusted it until this level matched the level in the background. Once I had that, it's a matter of transferring that angle to a couple pieces of wood. Now that I have the angle, I went ahead and took the angle finder and I simply took a piece of wood and drew the same angle. I wanted to get it to a point, not to a very sharp point, but to a decent point. And you'll notice I drew one on the left already, and now I'm finishing up the one on the right. And I took them to the table saw and cut them out, cleaned them up. All right, here's my two pieces of wood. Now I need to make sure that they work. So I took my smaller level and I checked for level. And there you go. This one matches this one. We're good. Now that I got that angle found and I figured that all out, let's go ahead and skip to the filter. These lids are called gamma lids, or the concept is, and they were created by the food industry so that you could store food in 5-gallon buckets and still keep it sealed from the elements. You can see the little white seal right there. All I'm doing is I'm going to cut the center portion out of these lids, leaving enough of the material there so I can connect it to the top and the bottom of the filter. The Wynn filter that I have is open on both ends. You can get one that it's closed off on one end because I have a bucket at the bottom and the other end is going to be connected to the plenum box. I bought the one that's open on both sides. Right about now, you're going to see me. I'm a little OCD when it comes to things. You don't have to clean up the inside of it like I do. I just like things to be clean and neat. So I got out my Dremel and I cleaned up all the flashing, the leftover plastic flashing all the way around. I sanded it down, not fine furniture sanding, just to kind of clean it up because I guess that's just the way I am. No one's ever going to see it, and it's not going to hurt the airflow. It's not going to hurt the filtering. It's just, honestly, it's just me being me. So maybe I overthink it sometimes. Anyway, once I got that done, it was time to put them on the actual filter. Now the filter comes with 4 of these clamps, or it's 6, I don't remember. And it only comes with one set, which is not enough for both sides. You can see right there, there's the clamp. It's honestly, it's just a hose clamp that's kind of cut short and bent over on the edges. Could I have made those myself? Absolutely. Did I want to? Absolutely not. It was just easier for me to order them for the price of going and getting a hose clamp and doing it myself, and or having them ship them to me for the cost that they sold them at. It's just a lot easier. You want to make sure that you don't get these overly tight
because they start bending that plastic over. And you'll see what I'm talking about later when I talk about the plastic bending over. Just a good snug fit. All right, this bucket's going to be sacrificed. I got to cut it off right about here, and I'm going to cut it as close as I can so I get as much material as possible, because that's the part that's going to be pushed through the bottom of the plenum box. So I'm going to cut it right along the edge of this reinforcement piece right here. Now, I know earlier I was a little bit OCD and I wanted to clean things up because that's just the way I am, but I have to get rid of these little pieces right here that used to hold the handle. Those have to get out of there, otherwise they're going to be in the way when I push it through the plenum box. Now that they're all cleaned up, you can see I've sanded them down a little bit. Move it down a little bit so we can see it, guy. All right, there you go. There you go, cleaned up. So now it's time to build a plenum box. Side note, I talked about how over tightening can cause this plastic to bow. I got the wrong lids. You actually need to buy name brand in this one. It's called the Gamma Seal lid. And when you put the right thing on there and you tighten it correctly, it doesn't bend the plastic. I lost on that one. Oh well. Junk. I made the plenum box out of 3/4 inch plywood. I actually had two kinds of plywood that were just laying around. I had some birch plywood and some cabinet grade oak plywood. This oak plywood I actually found it at Home Depot in the coal cart. Later on you'll see where it had a little bit of purple spray paint on it, and that's how Home Depot marks their throwaways, and they put it on a cart and they sell it, I believe, for something like 40% cheaper than they would regularly. And I snatched it up. Here I'm putting the rabbets in certain panels so that I can have larger glue surfaces to make sure that this plenum box is as tight as possible and as strong as possible, because it's not only going to be supporting itself, it's going to be supporting the filter that's going to be hanging off of it. Now that I got all the pieces cut, it's time to do a little dry fit to make sure everything fits right. Here you see me using these plywood blocks and F-clamps to kind of squeeze it together, so make sure that it stays pretty airtight, it fits well and it's square. You'll notice these little plywood blocks that I use. I only have one set of parallel clamps, and they're 48 inches long, so that would be a little overkill. So these little plywood blocks work pretty well for the same application. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it, just holding it still so I can measure off these pilot holes and drill into the top of this box, because I'm going to be putting screws on the edge, and well, when you're running screws into the edge of plywood, if you don't have pilot holes, it's going to split. I'm not putting it together right now. Like I said, this is a dry fit, but I am going to put some temporary screws in there to kind of hold it together so I can finish up some more measurements to make sure this thing fits in the right place. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over with the box dry fitted and screwed together a little bit. I'm going to be marking off where that interface between the motor and the plenum box meet. That actual coupler there, or that connection point, came with the Harbor Freight dust collector, and I'm just using it. And this hole has to be dead on so it stays pretty tight. Now you're going to see some really bad jigsaw work here. I am terrible with the jigsaw. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. This is just, I'm just terrible at it. But for those that are terrible at jigsaws and cutting holes, that's why they make this spindle sander, because it fixes everything. Now I can use a spindle sander. One thing I learned is, because I am terrible at cutting those things, the spindle sander is made to hide those imperfections. Just sneak up to the line. Now that I got everything put together, bam, that is sweet. plenum box is not going to hold itself up, so I need a set of brackets on the left and right side on the top. So I took that same oak plywood, that 3/4 inch plywood, and I threw this bracket together. It's real simple. It's going to screw into the frame and then screw into the top of the plenum box. So here's the one for the right and a smaller one to the left. These will work out really well. I went ahead and I painted them before I went any further than that. Krylon Special. That's what I'm talking about right there. While I was still into the dry fit, I went ahead and installed those brackets on the frame and ran pilot holes in the top of the plenum box for later. With the dry fit being done, I took it apart and I took that top part of that bucket I cut off, and I'm using it as a template to cut a hole in the bottom side of, or the bottom panel of the plenum box. And this is where it's got to slide through, and just like the other, this has to be a tight fit. Well, I'm going to put you through it again. Here's my not so awesome jigsaw skills. I get as close as I can without getting anywhere near that line because I know I have a spindle sander. Now that that horror film is over, back to the spindle sander. Look, I'm going to sneak up on this line and get it as perfect as possible because this connection is not a matter of loss of suction, but rather if it's not done right, any dust that gets past the dust collector, the dust deputy, is going to be going to this filter. And they're going to be small micronic particles. Micronic? Really small particles. And if this fitting is not done well, they can get past there and blow it right back in the garage. It ended up being a really tight fit. Even though it was a tight fit, I went ahead and put a bead of silicone in there before I pushed that connection through the 3/4 inch plywood panel. Now I'm securing it with some pocket hole screws. I'm really not so much securing the connection because, like I said, it's a tight fit. These screws are more meant to support the filter that's going to be hanging off the end of this plenum box. So I think I put 8 total. Remember I told you I cut the bucket just a little bit wide. I wanted to make sure I had enough material to go through the 3/4 inch plywood. That way I can go ahead and whip out the old Dremel and cut it off. I want to cut off the excess because if I don't, dust would pool up there and I'd have to find a way to get up in there and clean it out every once in a while. This just keeps it all flowing in one direction. Now that everything's been fabricated and dry fit, it's time to go ahead and throw some glue on this thing and pop some screws in and finish this thing up. It was really nice that all these holes were pre-drilled. It made it easier on assembly because they guided straight into the holes that were pre-drilled earlier. I did have to use a clamp to hold the top together long enough to run a screw in, but overall it went together pretty well. And here's the final look at it. I just used drywall screws. It's a piece that's going to be inside. I don't have to worry about the screws rusting. Speaking of rusting and corrosion, I don't have anything in my shop that I build that doesn't have some sort of paint or finish on it. I believe all wood has to be protected in one form or fashion. This is just Danish oil. I kind of wanted to just for color difference. I know the whole frame is rattle can special black, but I wanted to change it up. Now that the upper frame is done and the lower frame is done, the plenum box is done, it's time to hang some stuff on the wall. So let me climb up on this ladder and see if I can kill myself. I did try to record the whole assembly, but for some reason my camera didn't turn on and I'm not redoing it. But this is what it looked like. I laid a few things out. I checked to make sure everything was tight. The connection between the motor and the plenum box and the plenum box and the filter were all good. Looks good.
So that completes part 3 of this Harbor Freight Dust Collector Frankenstein build. During this video, I showed you how I built this plenum box and connected the Harbor Freight motor and this Wynn Environmental filter. It's real easy to clean it. I don't have one of those paddles that goes through there and you turn it to knock the dust loose. I simply use compressed air, knock it down, and then let it settle. Once it's settled, I can pull the whole filter or I can pull just the bucket. I hope you learned some stuff from this, and if you have any questions, you can put them down below. If you like what you see, go ahead and hit subscribe. I'll post other videos, and hit that bell, because that'll also let you know when more videos are posted. Again, my name is Scott Burge, and I am the Simple Tecton. I forgot to say something. There are some outtakes after this if you want to watch them. Maybe you'll get a laugh. See you on the next round. During this part, I'm going to show you how to, I'm not going to show you anything. I'm just going to show you what I did. I'm going to show you how I built this plenum box. Boy, I stumbled over that. Let's try that again. You cross your legs and lean up against it. Box through the use of the gamma and the environment, During this video, we're going to cover this plenum box and how it connects to. I'm pausing like a freaking moron. I'm not built for this stuff. There it came out. Let's try it again. During this video, I'm going to cover this. Connected it to this Harbor Freight. I hope I made it all Well, that completes this third part of this Frankenstein. Let me do this. So that completes part 3 of this Harbor Freight Dust Collector Frankenstein build, and I'm going to start again.